United States Coast Guard was founded in 1790 by Alexander Hamilton, and ever since the nation's secretaries of the Treasury have been in charge of its operations. At New London, Connecticut is the Coast Guard Academy, where hand-picked young cadets must study for 4 years before they are graduated and commissioned as Coast Guard officers. For many years, the U.S. Coast Guard has been training young Americans for careers at sea. And every year, 3 classes of the Academy's cadets leave their study halls for 3 months of practical experience aboard a seagoing Coast Guard cutter. For the duration of the summer training cruise, under the supervision of regular officers and Academy instructors, the cutter is almost entirely manned and navigated by the cadets themselves. Every cadet gets his chance to put into practice theory that he has learned from textbooks, to work out for himself problems in navigation, seamanship, and engineering. For the student officer must be prepared for the day when upon him falls the sole responsibility of taking a ship to sea. First port of call for the cruising cadets is the ancient city of Cartagena, on the Atlantic side of the Colombian Republic. The Republic of Colombia took its name from its discoverer, Christopher Columbus, and until the Revolution of 1810, it was governed by Spain. Cartagena was once the rich terminus of the overland trail by which the fabulous wealth of the ancient Incas was brought down to the sea. And many times during the 16th century, pirates of the Spanish Main sailed into the harbor to sack and loot. For its defense today, Colombia maintains a small but efficient navy, made up largely of destroyers, which guard its coastline, and of gunboats, which patrol its Orinoco River frontier with Venezuela. And like most Central and South American countries, the Republic of Colombia is finding that its tourist trade is growing, as more people are discovering the peaceful attractions of the Western Hemisphere. More than 300 miles from Cartagena is the southernmost continental possession of the U.S., the Panama Canal Zone. Today, the Panama Canal is guarded as never before in U.S. peacetime history. For the 50-mile waterway between the Atlantic and the Pacific is not only essential to world commerce, but it is the key to the defense of the entire American hemisphere. On the Pacific side of the canal zone is the port of Balboa, which is today an important operating base for the United States Navy. The Panama Canal, its locks and lakes and cuts, and all its defenses, is of major interest to young Coast Guardsmen. For in time of war, the Coast Guard is transferred to and becomes part of the United States Navy. As the cruising Coast Guard cutter continues to steam south, the cadets learn that no traditions are older or more honored than those of the sea and the men who follow the sea. Older than the memory of any seafaring man is the ritual of King Neptune's court, faithfully performed whenever a ship heading south reaches latitude 0, the Equator. By tradition, the waters of the Equator are the realm of Father Neptune, and first-time visitors to his kingdom are received with special rites. Once properly initiated, the landlubber becomes a shellback, duly authorized to carry on the ritual of transforming other landlubbers into seasoned shellbacks. Directly on the equator and named for it is the South American Republic of Ecuador, whose chief port is Guayaquil, at the mouth of the River Gaius. Following another long-established tradition of the sea, official visitors to ships of the U.S. Coast Guard are always received on board with naval honors. And it is on such visits that many South Americans have their only first-hand meeting with representatives and citizens of the great republic to the north. Sightseeing is an important part of every practice cruise. For through travel and observation, the cadet absorbs knowledge which makes him a better informed and more efficient officer. A gala occasion in every port of call is the ship's farewell party to friends and officials who have entertained Coast Guardsmen ashore. So popular are shipboard receptions that frequently the invitation lists must be made up by the American consul to avoid unintentional slighting of local dignitaries. For to be entertained aboard the visiting United States ship is considered in many places a mark of social distinction. South of Ecuador is Peru and the towering peaks of the Andes, one of the mightiest mountain chains in the world. Within these rocky slopes, 10,000 feet above sea level, are mineral deposits as rich as any in the world. Peruvian ores yield vast quantities of lead, zinc, copper, nickel, and other valuable metals, which in ancient times were a source of immense wealth to the great empire of the Incas, whose descendants still people the slopes of the Andes. Chief seaport of the Republic of Chile is Valparaiso, the southernmost big city on the western coast of South America. First visitors to the Coast Guard cutter are the ranking officers of Chile's Navy. Today, in common with other countries, Chile, with nearly 3,000 miles of coastline to protect, is increasing its armaments and defensive forces. The Chilean Naval Academy has upped its enrollment, and now in attendance are nearly 200 midshipmen, fledgling admirals whose training is patterned on the same system by which England trains officers for her Royal Navy. In Santiago, Chile's capital, the Coast Guard cadets are guests of honor at the nation's Army Day Review, held each year on the anniversary of Chile's greatest and most memorable victory, when, in a fierce war of the last century, its army defeated the combined forces of Bolivia and Peru. With its visit to Chile, the Coast Guard cutter has logged more than 5,000 nautical miles, the halfway mark, and the course is set for home. With long weeks of practice in engineering and seamanship behind them, the cadets are ready on arrival in U.S. waters to test their skill in another field of the Coast Guardsman's knowledge, ordnance and gunnery. For although essentially a peacetime service, the United States Coast Guard has distinguished itself in every war of the nation's history. As the cutter steams northward, there are some for whom homecoming marks the end of 3 happy and well-remembered summer cruises. The Academy's seniors, or first-classmen. For before the next cutter sails on a practice cruise, these sailormen will have attained the goal of every young cadet, the coveted commission as an officer of their chosen service, the United States Coast Guard.